Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is a published author, professional artist, compelling and empowering speaker, and certified trainer. She holds a BA in Fine Arts, an MA in Counseling Psychology, and a combined doctorate in Clinical and Organizational Psychology. Through the years, the focus of her work has always been personal and organizational transformation and leadership development, and she has been an international consultant, educator, and personal coach for thousands of clients since 1978. Mother of two, stepmother to three, and Nona to nine. She resides in Northern California with her husband and beloved Tibetan terrier. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Dr. Laura Basha.
Thank you for having me, Julia.
Laura, our opening question is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
That's a great question. As I thought about that question, I realized that I couldn't have written the book before I wrote the book. That said, the book is based on my dissertation. So I actually started writing this, or the bones of it, in the late 90s. And it's been edited many times. I self-published it initially, and then I redesigned it and edited it once again, and just had it published with a publisher that has a much larger distribution than I could do on my own. And so it just was published early this year. So taking this long to write this book, it's been edited so many times because my understanding of the work has deepened over the years. So when I edited or reread what I wrote initially, I realized as my understanding got deeper that there was a simpler way to say things. There was a better way to articulate it so it would get across. So again, I don't think I could have done it before I did it.
Well, I love the title of your book, The Inward Outlook. And you talk about how we as humans take in data from the world around us and store that in our intellect. And then thinking about it keeps us from living our lives in the present. We are living our lives in the past, dealing with that data. Can you tell us how that limits our lives?
Sure. What we do, all of us as human beings, it's kind of the way we're designed. We create the identity or the persona that we are over time. So depending on, what our parents thought, what community we grew up in, what spiritual background we come from, what cultural background we come from, what kind of education we have or don't have, what kind of finances we have or don't have. All of that information gets stored in the intellect and becomes kind of the story of who we are in our life. And it's useful. I mean, we want to have an identity and a personality to navigate this daily life that we have. Where it becomes limiting is that all of that information is information from the past. It's it may or may not be useful for who we have become today. And so there's we tend to listen to that information. That's the thinking that is repetitive in our head, and we don't notice it as thinking. We just think, well, that's who we are. That's how our friends know us. That's how our family knows us. There's a whole other, so it's a creation of who we are in the world of form, essentially. And yet it's not really how we can find well-being or peace of mind. There's a whole other identity that is available to all of us, and that's more of the essence of who we are, which is in the realm of the formless. It's in the realm of the timeless, eternal self, and to be able to access that quality of who we are, that realm. In the book, I reference it as a world of flow, a kind of flow thinking where you're present in the moment of now with no attention to thinking in the past. Thinking from the past, memory is useful. You don't want to walk into your garage and not know what this giant hunk of metal is in front of you. You want to remember that that's your car, and you want to remember how to drive that car, and you want to remember how to tie your shoes or Velcro your shoes in the morning. So memory is useful, but if we rely only on memory, then we are kind of caught in the past without realizing it. And there's no access to creativity. There's no access to well-being in the face of the challenges that life throws at us. So to have access to that eternal self, that essence of who we are, that's the realm of infinite intelligence and omniscient wisdom and omnipotent love. And those attributes of compassion and peace of mind and well-being are always available to all of us. They're equally everywhere present. We're looking at each other through that realm. It's the realization that is available to us. And so the book points to how to really access that in a very pragmatic, kind of step-by-step way, so that you actually can stand in that eternal essence of self with the feeling of well-being and compassion while you're accessing the data of memory of all the ways that you know how to navigate this world and this day-to-day life.
Well, your description is so amazing, because I think that we as humans are so remarkable, and we just don't even realize what we're capable of doing. I've been reading so much lately about this artificial intelligence, and it sounds like we're to create the past and input all the data for these artificial bots to work for us, but they certainly don't have all the other aspects that you've been describing. And they can only use what we've inputted, and that may be just our past.
Well, exactly. I mean, we can only program a computer with what we know, and what we know is huge. I mean, we pretty much have access to anything that we want to know about, and yet, if you can only Google what human beings already know. You can't Google an insight. You can't access genius through the computer. Now, there may be some AI technicians who we might have an interesting conversation about that, but still, because AI is a fascinating conversation, and yet the challenge and the opportunity, I think, right now in history for human beings, this may sound like a bold statement, is to practice not thinking, to practice really being present with a quiet mind. And that's what geniuses are doing, bringing in new thought, bringing in new ideas. The Michelangelos and the brilliant writers and the architects and the engineers and the scientists, they listen for what they don't know. And human beings like to know stuff. We don't like to not know. But that's the attachment to the identity. That's that identification with the form of who we are. And to identify with what we know is one way that we can sort of differentiate ourselves from each other and prove that we are separate and superior. So human beings like to be superior. We like to make other people wrong, which makes us be right. And it's all a more sophisticated identification with the form or with the past, but it doesn't give us access to compassion and insight and the way to see something new and peace of mind.
I love that you write about a roadmap to cultivating focus, because I really feel that we have lost focus and living in the moment and having those quiet times in our minds. We think we have to keep looking at our phone and checking our devices, and our minds are never quiet.
Exactly. And what that creates with that kind of focus so much on technology and turning away from now, there's some beauty about technology. For instance, this interview, that we can do something like this on Zoom, that we wouldn't even probably have met each other without this kind of technology. The downside of it is that we're disconnecting from each other in certain ways, and we've lost a sense of privacy because of this. It's having a real negative impact on some of the young folks who grew up with this, and yet it it allows for communication without having to be responsible or accountable for what you're saying, and it creates what we could call a busy mind. So you're so identified with your thinking at that point that you're kind of get on this hamster wheel of thinking, and it creates a lot of anxiety. It creates depression, and it cuts us off from that quiet mind and that sense of well-being and rejuvenation. And we don't realize that that's what we're doing to ourselves. It creates a lot of suffering. People are suffering in the world, and most of the suffering that human beings deal with, and I'm not talking about some of the atrocities that we're seeing happening in the world. Most of the suffering that human beings deal with is because of the attention to the quality of thinking that we have, and we don't realize that we're doing that.
Or the fact that we don't have any real conversations and communicate with each other. I've watched people in restaurants, everyone at the table has a phone, and they're all on their phones, and they're not communicating. We don't even put our phones down during meals to have a nice, pleasant conversation with people around us.
Yes, and we wonder why we're going crazy.
Well, so many professionals use their books as calling cards and to expand the reach of their message. Has this book been successful in those ways for you, or people finding you because of the book?
It has, actually. And I've used the book in its earlier iterations with one company that I worked with, an international consulting firm. And I taught from the book. We did a whole year of bringing the whole company through this work. So I actually worked with this particular paradigm with them for 15 years. And so some of those folks who were younger are now partners in the firm, and they're reaching out to me to create a master class. So I'll be working with them to, they're road warriors. So they're out internationally doing that culture shaping work they're doing. And I'm working with them so that they will then get grounding to be able to pass the baton. The book has gotten very good reviews, and I've done several conversations like this, so it'll go out to other people's, media platforms. And the reason at this age that I'm doing this is it's a paradigm that I've used in a variety of arenas, and it changes people's lives for the better. So I wanted to make it available to a wider audience who might never meet someone like us or listen to podcasts, or and people who are feeling hopeless, that they might even come across it on my website or come across the book and see possibility where it looked like there wasn't any, and the book will and the paradigm would outlive me and continue to be a contribution. So a calling card, yes, although I'm at this stage, I'm not interested in building a brand. I'm just interested in making this available. So working with younger people who will work with younger people, and doing this kind of outreach, it fulfills my purpose in wanting to get this out to as many people as I can, particularly at this time in history.
I think it's definitely a legacy project, and for you to be able to pass along what your life's work has been to others it's just got to be so fulfilling and satisfying.
It is very fulfilling. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And yet, as with anything worthwhile, writing a book, even, you want to have a larger purpose than just getting your name out on a book, because you're going to want to quit. So my artwork and my writing and the teaching that I do is all part of that legacy. And all of it will eventually just be on the website, so that it will, and then I've asked my son if he'll, long after mom is gone, if he'll just keep that. I'll leave money in the trust fund to keep this going. So yes, it is. It's very fulfilling. It takes years to master something. I mean, decades to master something like this. So to pay it forward is really very fulfilling.
Well, I know that this project has just been released recently, but do you have any other books in you?
This is actually one of three. I'm in a part of an anthology of another book that a group of women authors created. It's available. It's called Art in the Time of Unbearable Crisis. And the proceeds of the book are going to World Central Kitchen to feed the people on the borders of Ukraine. So that was pretty moving for me to be a part of that. And then I have another book coming out next year. It's called All Is Chosen, and it's based on 8 of my paintings, each one representing an archetypal image of what it means to be a human being. And so that book is in process with a publisher in London. And the website again, whitebirdrising.com. There's drop-down menus that talk about all the books. I don't know if there's any more books in me. Maybe there's a memoir, but we'll see.
Well, you're working with Brooke Warner, and she writes press, and she is the queen of memoirs, so she might encourage you along the way.
She has. She's awesome. And yes, I've been in several of those conversations with her about a memoir. And, I think I want to get through these couple and then, maybe a couple more years down the road, because writing is wonderful. And Brooke is fabulous. She Writes Press is a great hybrid publishing company. A little plug.
We writers love to write, but we don't like to promote ourselves, and publicity, even for those of us who spend our lives in public relations and marketing, find it difficult. Have you found any publicity that's worked for you?
Well, I have a great publicist, and the reviews have been positive. I think all of it that I've done has worked. It's true, it's not my favorite thing to do. And it takes something, it takes some effort. And again, I think if I was under 50, I would be engaging with a little more vitality than I am now. But I do love speaking in person to people, and I am motivated to promote the work. But it's a vulnerability, and as an author, you really are alone and quiet with that creative process. And so there's maybe an introverted aspect to a lot of authors that you're more comfortable being sort of behind the scenes in a way. And it is challenging. This again gets back to thought, because when you're presenting or doing publicity, if you're thinking about how you're doing, that's where the anxiety and the nervousness and the distraction comes from. If you can just be present in the conversation, then it's like, it's like this, just talking with someone like a friend. And actually, in front of the room, I've always been comfortable. I mean, talking to 50 people to me, or 200 people, is the same as talking to one. Because I know what I want to talk about. I'm very clear about what I want to talk about. So I kind of practice that on my own. And then I clear my head and I go and just be present in the room with people, and like I'm doing now. And then you just trust that the wisdom and the knowledge that you have and the practicing that you've done will be available to you, but it will be most appropriate to the conversation because you'll be present with the people who are listening. Here's the thing: if you're going to put yourself out in the public, people are going to think whatever they think, no matter what you do. So this book is great for some people, and this book is not for some people. Same with artwork. As an artist, I create the painting until it works for me. And there's some paintings take years to complete. There's paintings in this new book that took me 10 years to do these 8 paintings. So you put them aside, you come back to them. But when you're done, it's like a child that you've set to go out in the world. And so if someone likes it, great. If they don't like it, they should go find some artwork they like somewhere else. So this work that I do would require somebody who's interested in really growing and developing and breaking through patterns of limitation so they could become the person they always wanted to be, but were afraid they couldn't. And that means you have to be willing to look at your own defenses and your own patterns of sort of protection coming from fear, but to look at them without judgment. We all have created ourselves out of defending ourselves. Most of the ways we defend ourselves, we made up as little 4-year-olds trying to survive in this household of big people. So it was brilliant strategies for a 4-year-old, but for a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 30-year-old, it's probably not working. So if you're willing to shine the light on those patterns of limitation and appreciate that they were brilliant strategies for a kid, but you want to recreate one, then you can become more conscious about how you're choosing to be in the world. And the result is mind that you can't get anywhere else.
Well, it certainly is more difficult to look inward and to realize our shortcomings and to be able to put forth the work and the commitment to work on those. But I'm glad that you have this book to help us along the way.
Well, thank you. It's not as hard as you think. It's really not. It's being, once you stop judging yourself for the crazy ways that you've become, and you have a little bit of humor about it, you realize that you were actually always hardwired to be free from that. We as human beings were designed as humans, but it's the being part that we forget. And it's just a shift in perception that opens up a whole world of possibility. And there's no, things that you have to remember to do right. It's just a capacity of recognizing when you're caught up in your thinking. As soon as you realize you're caught up in your thinking, you're actually not in your thinking anymore. Because the thinking we're caught up in is what the book references, what I reference in the book, is sort of this process, repetitive memory. And the flow state is this diffuse, in the moment, kind of being in the now. And to stand in that space, which is the inward part of the inward outlook, and to look out into the daily world that we live in, gives you that kind of peace of mind, common sense, a kind of emotional equilibrium, and compassion to deal with whatever comes up in life. And everybody has a crucible in their life at some point. Everybody, life is meant to be challenging. Because without challenges, we don't grow and evolve. There's a way to do it without suffering. There's actually a way to do it with joy. We're not very good at that. We're good at suffering, but we're not very good at growing through joy. And the book points a way to dealing with the challenges of life through joy.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the passages that you've brought to share today, and then read so that we can hear your tone and voice in the book?
Very good. Well, I've noticed that in a lot of the questions people have about the book, they seem to be really drawn to the chapter on transformational humor. So I thought I would read a couple paragraphs from that. The art of transformation lies in knowing that the thought is the thing. A transformational shift would be one in which a fundamental shift in perspective takes place. How can you take an inspirational and lighthearted insight and sustain it throughout a time-constrained and stressful day? And how do you then sustain it through the next day and the next, so that it carries with it its own rejuvenation, building a new foundation upon which to greet not only your day, but your world? And if you could develop this capacity, how impactful would it be, and in what way? One common thread in having such a capacity does seem to be a deep sense of compassionate humor, considering the possibility that there is a way to maintain clarity, lightheartedness, and peace of mind in the face of a seemingly or actually formidable life experience is a markedly different perspective from the habitual ways in which we have greeted it. Compassionate transformational humor, intrinsic in this inward outlook paradigm, unveils to us a supreme simplicity previously masked by the intellect with an apparent mysterious complexity. Transformational, compassionate humor dissolves struggle. It transmutes our thinking from attachment to the constraints of the personal into non-attachment, inviting the freedom and wisdom characteristic of the impersonal. Transformational humor is the capacity to be profoundly present while being joyfully childlike, infused with the wisdom of the elders.
Wow. That's very deep, Laura, and yet you put it in layman's terms so that we can understand it, I think.
Well, thank you. That was the plan. It is deep because we are all deep. and that's where the work gets done. And it's not hard. It's not something to be afraid of. It takes a commitment to being free from those constraints.
Well, I love the fact that we can stop judging ourselves and that we can find joy and be present. That's what I want to be in what I'm calling life's sweetest third.
Very good. Exactly.
Well, as always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are quite a unique group. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Well, I don't know about advice. I would say that over 50, we've walked through quite a bit of life experience, and all of us have wisdom to share. And if you are drawn to writing, if you are inspired to write, I would say make sure that you have a bigger commitment than to yourself. Like, what is the larger purpose that you want to be accomplishing? What is it you really want to be contributing for others? And there's so many unique ways that we contribute, and every one of our life stories is unique and sacred, and will be a contribution to many different people. So if you are drawn to writing and you have a larger commitment, the larger commitment will keep you going, because it takes something. And I find, you want to quit. I remember writing this book thinking, who needs another book? There's so many books out there. And then what came to me was, if this book helps one person, just one person, then it will be worth the writing. So my book is more of a teaching kind of self-help book, but I know many authors whose books are memoirs, and they just tell the story of what they have gone through and then how they sort of resurrected from it. And they're very moving, and they help people go through all sorts of experiences in life. So if you have a book in you and you are inspired to write, I say go for it.
I agree. And I think that if we can touch one other soul with what we have learned over all these years, and with your wisdom and from all of your clients and everything that you have found to be this paradigm that can help others and to help us all find joy, then I think that that's the legacy that we certainly want to leave on this planet. So thank you so much for sharing with us today, and for being here, and for your book. And we are excited to say that you're now one of our authors over 50.
Thank you so much, Julie. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.